Hi, everyone, and welcome to Gratitude Tuesday. My name's Rena, and I'm a recovery coach here at Capital Recovery Center. Today, we are going to talk about how to prevent unhealthy habits in recovery. So we're going to look at some self-care type of thing and some things that you can do to avoid these unhealthy habits. This article comes to us from therecoveryvillage.com. And it starts out by saying learning about what causes bad habits during addiction recovery and how to stop unhealthy habits from developing. So during addiction recovery, people are at a higher risk of developing unhealthy habits. Addiction is often used as a way of coping with stress. Even if drugs and alcohol are not initially used as a way of coping with stress, addictive substances may become familiar or comforting to use, causing them to become a way of coping with stress. When someone stops using an addictive substance, they will no longer have the ability to turn to that substance to cope with stress and will develop other coping mechanisms. These coping mechanisms can include healthy ways of coping, but can also result in unhealthy coping techniques. And that's a very common thing in recovery. We put down the drugs, and which was like our lifeline basically to deal with whatever it is we were dealing with. We put all that down and now we have nothing. So, changing that mindset to be from unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy habits to healthy ones is not an easy thing to do, because a lot of us during active addiction, we stole, we lied, we cheated, all these unhealthy habits that now we have to learn how to change, and while we're living without the substances. So it's very common to develop some unhealthy habits or continue along with already established unhealthy habits while trying to maintain the sobriety. So it goes on to talk about how unhealthy habits in recovery. There are several unhealthy habits that people may pick up during or following a drug addiction recovery. These habits are related to finding new ways to cope that replace the initial addiction. And I'm sure many of you have heard, you're just replacing one addiction with another, and that can be anything from, you put down the drugs, but now, it's spending money, it's sex, it's adrenaline, it's like all these different things that, we start focusing on and become obsessed with and act compulsively with. And it's the same, behaviors and the same actions that we use in active addiction. So it's very hard to try and bring all that, together and not still have some bad habits. So the first one that they talk about is an exercise addiction. Now, let me start by saying that exercise is great. It's all part of a healthy routine. It's a way to cope with stress. It's a way to, start to feel healthy again and get active. But it can go to the extreme. So it says that exercise is a healthy coping mechanism and can be an important and valuable tool in the addiction recovery process. Exercise can also promote a healthy lifestyle and lead to overall improvements in health and wellness. While exercise has its benefits, some people who are recovering from addiction may become overly obsessed with exercising to an unhealthy degree and develop an exercise addiction. This addiction can result in harm to muscles and bones and malnutrition. It may also interfere with one's social life or work life. And this is very true. I've seen this happen. More recently, in my recovery, I started going to the gym and, trying to get healthy and do some things to strengthen, my body and everything. And I have seen people who were active users now in recovery, not using, and they're there constantly. They're overdoing it. They're pushing limits. I had one guy who I know personally, and he's like, I live here. If I'm not at work, this is where I am. And it just becomes like this unhealthy coping mechanism. So it's very easy to take a healthy habit and turn it into an unhealthy one when you apply the obsession and compulsion that was there in active addiction. So the next one they talk about is an eating disorder. So those recovering from addiction may develop unhealthy eating habits, such as overeating or undereating. Overeating results when someone uses food to cope with stress, especially foods that are considered comfort foods. Someone who is eating because they feel an emotional need to do so instead of hunger may have developed a binge eating disorder. On the other end of the spectrum, people who are overcoming addiction may develop eating disorders such as anorexia, where they develop the false idea that they need to eat less. Eating disorders can become dangerous, and those who have one should seek immediate medical care. Signs that you are developing an eating disorder may include skipping meals, believing that you are overweight, even when others tell you that you are too thin, deliberately vomiting after a meal, or avoiding food altogether. Checking it out. So I know a lot of you have heard the cliche, like you put down the spoon and you pick up the fork, right? So, and this is very common. You've denied your body food and nourishment for so long, and you get clean, and now it's like you're trying to put it all back all at once. And I myself struggle with this, especially in early recovery. It's like I was replacing the drugs with food. So like, you're not supposed to eat a pint of ice cream every night. You know what I mean? But it became my comfort. And, then like eventually, you get to the point where it's like, okay, something's got to change. And this can go in the opposite direction again, like it talks about having anorexia and that sort of thing. Like, going too far and denying your body the sustenance that it needs. So today, guys, we are talking about, I had a couple people come in, yay. I'm just sitting here by myself. Okay. So we're talking about preventing unhealthy habits in recovery. And we talked about exercise addiction, and we just talked about eating disorders. So the next one it talks about as an anxiety disorders. So it says that those who don't find new ways of coping with stress and recovery may develop an anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorders may occur because the coping mechanisms of using substances is no longer available, and without a new coping mechanism, anxiety is more likely to be experienced. While some feeling of anxiety or agitation is not uncommon during the recovery process, those who have severe anxiety to continue to have anxiety on a long-term basis after becoming sober may have developed an anxiety disorder. I have yet to meet an addict in early recovery without anxiety. I think this is almost like par for the course when you first get clean, because you're in a whole new world. It's like everything is different. You just took away basically what was my entire life, and now I have nothing. And it's very hard to, come into recovery and just be like, okay, I'm here, yay. You know what I mean? There's some anxiety involved with that. There's some like lack of confidence and all these other things, and you're learning how to live a new way of life. However, that can get to the point where it becomes debilitating for some people. You don't want to go outside, you know what I mean? Having a conversation with somebody is overwhelming, or even like daily tasks can just be very overwhelming. I remember early in recovery, it's like, okay, you got to call the doctor for this, or you need to set up this, or you need to fill out this paperwork. And it felt like you were asking me to do brain surgery. And it was just overwhelming, and just created all this anxiety for me. But eventually, you know what I mean? You just keep going, and eventually you can get out of it. If you can't, seek help for any of these, for the exercising, the eating, the anxiety. We're going to talk about smoking next. Like, if you can't do it on your own, or you feel that it is like a debilitating thing for your recovery in your life, seek help. There's so much out there to help you with these things. The next one is smoking. Do one of you guys want to read?
All right.
Okay.
Many people tend to view smoking cigarettes as simply a bad habit. Unfortunately, what many refer to as a smoking habit is actually a nicotine addiction. This addiction is more commonly accepted in society, and many do not stop to consider that it is truly an addiction. When someone is recovering from substance addiction, they may come to rely more heavily on their nicotine addiction to help them cope with their stressors. The best way to avoid developing an increased dependence on smoking during recovery is to consider quitting smoking in recovery. Recovery programs will be supportive of this decision, and much of what the recovery program covers can be applied to smoking.
And like, I believe that can be applied to any of these. So in smoking and addiction, a lot of people I know in active use and in recovery, like smoking is like the one thing they do not want to get rid of yet. And that's completely understandable. It's hard. Yep. It's hard enough to set the drugs aside, but now you're like, okay, well, I can go to Wawa and buy this. Like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those
It's crazy,
things.
'cause for me, when I was like heavy in addiction, that was like the main thing that I wanted to get rid of
Yeah.
was smoking. It was like, dude, I'm getting nothing out of this. Why am I wasting $10 on a pack of cigarettes?
Right.
I'm fucking smoking. Like, I don't smoke, the cigarette smokes. I'm a fucking sucker.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Like, freaking, that's all you are is a sucker. The cigarette
Yeah.
smoking, you know what I mean? You get nothing out of it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't know. But then I ended up having to get a stent put in and all that. And it was like just one day, my cardiologist was like, yo,
Yeah.
I had to go to the hospital. And they were like, you made it here by like 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes, and like you're on a time clock. Like,
Wow.
I was gonna have a heart attack.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
freaking went in, freaking they did it, and I ain't smoked since.
It's so much more damage than we realize because it does it over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It's not like the drugs where it's like that immediate, okay, you can overdose or you get, you know what I mean? It's just
I
like
even quit
prolonged.
smoking weed, went to edibles, and like the whole freaking thing. Like, it scared the shit out of me.
I imagine,
Go in
yeah.
there and you got all these nurses over you, and they're like shaving it. You don't know any of them, and they're just all attacking it. It's
Mhm.
freaking overwhelming, big time. You
Yeah.
don't realize it until you're in that
Right.
situation, and it's like, dude, they're gonna put me under in some freaking anesthesia, and like you sign your life away. Like
Mhm.
freaking, what do you want to do? Do not resuscitate this and that. Like, dude, when you start writing, like signing your name on documents like that,
Yeah.
you know, like, oh my
It's
God,
serious.
something's gotta fucking change. man.
Yep, it's serious. Yeah. And that it is, it's a hard one. Like I always, everybody when I got clean was like, you don't smoke? I was like, no. You don't drink coffee? I said, no. Like I
Yeah.
smoked years ago,
Yeah.
but like I haven't had a cigarette. My daughter's 22. Like I haven't had a cigarette. You know what I mean? And it's very uncommon because it's like,
Right.
you know, that you can,
That's like the
so
fall
easy.
thing
Yeah.
for so many
Yup.
addicts.
yep.
You know what I mean? They fall right into it.
But there's so many things, again, like to get help for that. You know what I mean? Like there's a hotline and they'll send you patches and gum and you know what I mean? And just if you are in a recovery program, like a 12-step program or whatever, you just apply that same thing to smoking. It
Right.
just can be a little more difficult.
Yeah.
So the next one, it's going to talk about like bad habits versus addiction. You want to read or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It says many people wonder what the difference is between a bad habit and a true addiction. Typically, a bad habit is a normal or reflective response to stress, while addiction is a craving that is viewed as necessary and is difficult to stop. Someone who has an addiction as opposed to a bad habit will usually find that the behavior is having a negative impact on their life. Stopping the behavior leads to cravings or withdrawal symptoms. They have tried to hide their behavior from others. They have tried repeatedly and unsuccessfully to stop their behavior. The behavior puts them in risky situations. If you find that one or more of these is true about your bad habit, then it is likely a bad habit is actually an addiction.
Absolutely. Anything that makes your life unmanageable. And like, especially if you feel the need to hide it or to stop dealing with what you need to be dealing with to take care of that, like that's where all your focus is. It's really time to like kind of step back and take a look at those things. And I've seen this with people with spending money, you know, like the smoking, you know, and stuff like that. Like when you try to stop and you can't, that's when you've crossed that line. So just something to be mindful of. So what causes unhealthy habits in addiction recovery? So drug addiction recovery involves stopping a comfortable and reflexive behavior. This behavior is normally comforting as it is familiar and something that is relied on during stressful times. While this behavior is harmful, it does provide comfort, relaxation, and escape. One important goal during recovery is to replace this behavior with other healthier ways of coping. One of the first stresses that will occur is during early recovery, as the ability to use a substance that brought comfort is withdrawn. During this crucial step, learning healthy ways to cope without the substance is absolutely necessary. It is at this stage that unhealthy habits can begin to develop if other coping mechanisms are not learned. So like I said, with like a pint of ice cream a day, that unhealthy, coping mechanism could have resulted in a much more extreme situation, than it did. But thankfully, like being in recovery, I started to use what I learned as far as recovering from the drug addiction and apply it to other unhealthy things in my life. So that's really what it's all about, is like identifying those unhealthy habits and trying to like nip them in the bud before they come, a bigger problem. And we spend so much time, training our brains to like get up, figure out how you're going to go get the money to use, go buy the drugs to use the drugs. Okay, now we got to start. It's just this constant cycle in your head. So, you're trying to learn how to cut that cycle. And a lot of times that cycle will begin with other things besides the drugs.
It's like your body just becomes like a motor engine. It's used to having gasoline and oil put in it, and it runs and runs and runs. And then go ahead and try and put like ethanol alcohol in it and make it run and like change it completely.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's gonna act up on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way of looking at it.
Your body just becomes so used to like in your mind. It's really your mind overall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your body craves it and needs certain drugs, whatever, but it's all in your head. It's a fucking little monkey on your shoulder.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It starts talking to you. You gotta learn how to like shut him the hell up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Yep.
So it goes on to talk about preventing bad habits from derailing your recovery. Preventing bad habits requires an understanding that these habits develop as a new way of coping with stress. The key to avoiding these bad habits during drug and alcohol addiction recovery is to focus on developing healthy ways of coping before other unhealthy habits set in. This is why having a relapse prevention plan is often stressed as a vital part of recovery process. So it's like we just said, it's stopping that unhealthy, habit before it becomes, an addiction or like a worse negative aspect of your life. So the last part of this is going to talk about how, getting treatment and practicing mindfulness and everything in recovery is beneficial to helping, knock out these unhealthy habits. So I still have I don't have a thing for that. So the first one, it says you should seek treatment for co-occurring disorders. Seeking dual diagnosis treatment is important for those who have an existing mental health condition in addition to a substance addiction. Undergoing integrated treatment for co-occurring disorders will decrease the stressors that may lead to the development of an unhealthy habit. And co-occurring disorders is very, very common with addiction. And if you are dealing with mental health issues or eating disorder issues or anything else, seeking the proper treatment is like your best route. I myself, I have struggled with mental illness my entire life. I see a therapist. I see a nurse practitioner for medication. I did like a mental health IOP when I first got clean, because I knew that while my 12-step membership was what was going to help me with my addiction, it's not going to help diagnose and treat my mental health. It helps because it helps me learn how to cope, but a professional was needed. And like that happens a lot with addiction, where you have some sort of co-occurring disorder. Anyone want to read Practicing Mindfulness?
Practicing mindfulness in recovery. Practicing mindfulness during recovery can be an excellent coping mechanism that helps to reduce the risk of developing an unhealthy way of coping. A mindful recovery can involve meditation, relaxation, memorizing inspiring addiction recovery quotes, developing a mantra, or any other method of centering yourself in the present moment. So
mindfulness is one of those things that goes along with our gratitude. because they always say like a grateful addict will never use. And, finding that gratitude is a lot of, practicing mindfulness, being aware of the things around you, being aware of like maybe, unhealthy things to replace them with healthy things. And at first it can sound a little hokey. Like I admit that, like when I first got clean, trying to sit still and meditate was impossible. I couldn't keep my mind quiet for 3 seconds, let alone like 3 minutes or, whatever else trying to meditate. But over time, you kind of like start to apply these little things. And if you're involved in a recovery group like 12-step or like a religious fellowship or any of those other things, you'll start to hear these little mantras and these little, recovery quotes. And before you know it, you're saying them yourself. Like a grateful addict will never use. That's one that, has stuck with me for a long time. So while it might seem a little impossible or a little hokey in the beginning, sometimes these things start to happen in your life without your permission. And, that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. How about seeking support?
This is one way to avoid developing unhealthy ways of coping is to learn to cope with stress using the support of others. This is why peer support is emphasized in the addiction recovery process and why recovery support groups and systems are helpful in maintaining sobriety.
Absolutely. Don't do this on your own.
Yeah.
Find your support system. Find your, your people. Come here. Join one of our groups. Just come in and talk to somebody. If you're someone that doesn't have a lot of family or like a lot of support system, because maybe everybody else is still using, that sort of thing, it's really important to find people that are doing the right thing that can help support your recovery. Like for me, that's 12-step fellowship. I have this extended family of like 100 people that I know at any point I need something, I can call one of them and they're going to be there for me. Those times that like you're struggling with wanting to use or anything else, like it can be very hard to just pick up the phone and ask for help.
That's funny, because in your addiction, how many people in active addiction could you call to help? None of them. They're too busy getting high.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like freaking, oh, you're trying to get clean or do something to stay clean. Yeah, I'm not doing that right now. I'm like trying to get high and find a way to keep getting high.
There's no support at all.
Oh, yeah. Crazy.
But yeah, that support system is very, very important. Even if it's you have a hobby that you enjoy, you know what I mean? Like people join bowling leagues or pool leagues and like different things like that. That can be a great support system. The people that you're involved with in those things as well. So last part talks about replace bad habits with good habits. If you have developed a bad habit during addiction recovery, it is not enough to simply replace a bad habit. Someone wishing to get rid of an unhealthy habit must focus on replacing bad habits with healthy ones. By replacing bad habits with good habits, you can develop the tools to cope with stress in life while avoiding the negative effects that bad habits can cause. If you or a loved one struggle with addiction, realize that recovery is possible. We're not going to talk about the recovery village, but replacing the negative with the positive. And we talk about that in so many different aspects of recovery, whether it's your mindset, whether it's, the food you eat or the thing, like the habits that you're trying to break, whatever it may be, like trying to find the positive instead of the negative, goes a long, long way when it comes to recovery. Because when we get stuck in like that negative thinking and the bad habits, it's going to inevitably lead us back to, drug of choice or active addiction because we don't feel like we're growing. We don't feel like things are getting any better. So it's very important to, try and flip that switch and find like the positive in things. And that can be something as simple as like, and we talk about this a lot with like gratitude, is like being grateful that I can get up and take a warm shower. Grateful that I can like go to work in my car. You know what I mean? Like simple things that we do every day that we might take for granted, focusing on them and being grateful for them can help you start to flip that switch into a more positive mindset. So that is all we have for today. Thank you for joining us. And as always, we love it when you guys can come in and interact with us and take part in our groups. And we will see you next time.